I've been to hundreds of conferences, and that's the most fun I've ever had at a conference last night. And I'm glad y'all, seriously, and I'm glad y'all all made it in here this morning to listen to what is sort of a bizarre topic if you look at the title of it. How many of y'all have like a working understanding of blockchain? Okay, good. I'll get deeper into it as we go along, but I'm going to sort of introduce it to begin with. I threw this up here just because it's kind of cool. We're in Palm Springs, and this house is in Palm Springs. This is Bob Hope's house, and I figure it's facilities. That's my ex-wife, isn't it? Yeah. She heard about it last night, didn't she? My kids did, though. My kids are so proud of their dad this morning. I sent them a video. That's Bob Hope's house. It's up on the side of the mountain right there. And I think it was used in Diamonds Are Forever. But I figure we're a facilities conference, and that's kind of a good slide or two to start off what's going to be kind of a complex topic. And normally I start off these kind of things talking about how something that appears as a black swan. And y'all know what a black swan is. It comes out of nowhere and changes everything. But in the case of the blockchain and how it affects facilities, it's almost a little bit more than that. I feel as though the blockchain really is sort of the biggest thing since the internet, which came out, I guess, 25 years ago. But what's odd about that is the blockchain is really an offshoot of Bitcoin. All right, how many of y'all own Bitcoin? When I started doing speeches on Bitcoin, which was about 5 or 6 years ago, I went back and checked, and if on the first day I did a speech on Bitcoin, if I'd bought $100 of Bitcoin that day, I would have $93 million right now. So that's generally what attracts people to Bitcoin is everybody's like, oh my God, people are making money. This week it went from $5,000, well last week, went from $5,000, $5,500 to $7,000 in a week, all right, one Bitcoin. That gets all the attention, but it's really the blockchain that's gonna be the important thing. And if you go back and look at the internet and then look forward with the blockchain, which is what I'm gonna try and get y'all to do in this, I want y'all to think abstractly in this speech, is I want y'all to think, back when the internet first came out, a lot of people were very, very wrong about it. This was an article in Newsweek by a guy named Clifford Stoll, and he's like, why the web won't be nirvana. I'm uneasy about this oversold community. Commerce and business, they say will shift to networks and modems, and all these things will happen. He's like, baloney. It'll never happen. The truth is, and this is a very respected researcher, truth is no online database will replace your daily newspaper. Yeah. No CD can take the place of a competent teacher, and no computer network will change the way government works. And of course, that turned out to be completely wrong, and it's, oh yeah, you can't tote a laptop to the beach. Nobody's ever going to read a book on a computer. You just couldn't, and it's not his fault. Nobody could really visualize sort of the immensity of the things that are going to go on. And so if you sort of use the internet as a frame of reference and what all came from that, and then you look at Bitcoin and you kind of look ahead, you can see some weird things and hear some wild stories. That's Homer Simpson's brain. And why do people get the future so wrong? Because they dedicate about 5 minutes to looking at something before they form an opinion on it. That's exactly what I do. Or because it challenges their position of power. This is Jamie Dimon from Chase, and he's been running around saying that Bitcoin is a fraud. And when he, in September, the 12th of September, said Bitcoin was a fraud, it caused it to crash from 4,400 to 4,100. And I haven't checked it this morning, but it's hovering, so what is that, 2 months ago? It's hovering around 7,000 this morning. So it's a fraud that went from 4,000 to 7,000 in a couple of months, which I have a feeling is more than any investment at JP Morgan Chase went up during the same time. It threatens his position of power because it's an alternate method of investment and it's an alternate method of payments. All right, people can't see clearly when they're the main beneficiaries of the status quo. They don't want to see what's coming. And that's why I think blockchain, people are kind of tuning it out a little bit. It's like information warfare going on inside your whole brain. And so what I want to focus on is understanding business applications, specifically in the facilities business, where decentralized systems and transparent ledgers, which is the blockchain, and y'all will have a working knowledge of it by the time I'm done, I hope, drive value and make sense. So what I'm going to try and do this morning is really make the blockchain make sense, and then have you be able to look ahead for yourself and see how it might apply to you. And it's all about data. All right, the blockchain is completely all about data and a new way to store and access data, and businesses are basically all transforming into data businesses right now. This is University Hospital. That is where my dad was born. He worked, he died there. My ex-wife works there. Both my children were born in the nursery, which is right up front there. I have a long history with that hospital, and what y'all know with healthcare facilities now is that healthcare facilities basically are turning into data institutions, big-time data institutions from a variety of sources. Back in the 50s, John Hancock became a data company with just 600 megabytes of storage. That was in the 50s. In the 60s, Sabre changed the airline reservation business with just 807 megabytes of data. FedEx changed logistics, running a computer that had 80 gigabytes of storage in the 70s. In the 80s, the ATM business was pretty much invented by Citicorp with 450 gigabytes of data. And Walmart, at the end of the 2000s, they were using about 180 terabytes of data, but it's petabytes of data now. And I made a film about Walmart, and at the time, I learned all kinds of just very, very strange facts about Walmart, but what I really learned is that Walmart is not a store. Walmart is a computer program, all right, dressed up as a store. It's an algorithm. Walmart is so sophisticated, I've told this story before, but Walmart is so sophisticated that let's say if a hurricane is heading towards Miami, it knows to automatically order two things. All right, what would you guess they are? Think last night. Both beer, and what else would apply to last night? Diapers would apply to last night. I don't know, some of us, maybe. Not naming names. That would be wrong, Michael. But anyway, everything's all about data now, and so what I want to do is try and explain the blockchain and how that actually serves data and allows y'all to access it in a different way, and how all the sensors that are going to be throughout all your facilities are going to be generating data, and how that data is going to be assessed and stored on the blockchain for the people that need the data to access it at that time, all right? It's a decentralized ledger. It's like a huge Excel spreadsheet that only the people you want to access can access it. And the reason I say that is if you understand Google Docs, how many of y'all have worked with Google Docs? All right, you can understand the blockchain then, because the blockchain is essentially like two people in different places accessing a certain cell in Google Docs at the same time and working on it, but those are the only two people who are permissioned for it, all right? So let me go into more of a technical, explanation of this. And it all started with Bitcoin, which came out about 10 years ago. An academic paper came out, which was written by nobody still knows who. Nobody still knows who invented Bitcoin or the blockchain. It was just released as an academic paper, and it's going to create a $5 trillion industry, which is just one of the wildest things, ever in the history of business. Now, I'm not going to say when I started studying, Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining that I took an entire room in my house and started mining Bitcoin, but I did, and that's the room in my house where I was mining Bitcoin when it first came out because I got so fascinated by it. Entire countries, when Argentina had a currency crisis, entire countries had people speeding around on little motorbikes, and they were doing transactions in Bitcoin because they couldn't trust the currency at the time. This was about 3 years ago, and it's very portable. If you try and send money to another bank through ACH, it'll take a day or two or 3 to 5 business days. Well, these guys sat at a table in Vegas and sent, I believe, it was $250,000 from phone to phone to phone to phone to phone in about 15 minutes. All right, that's how quickly they could transfer money. And they were sending Bitcoin, but everything was powered by the blockchain, which is what I want y'all to concentrate on. But Bitcoin is getting all the noise, right? So much so that the New York Times says it's essentially going to be one of the 6 major currencies in the world. Bitcoin is, which may happen. It's sort of the brand name. There's lots of other currencies, cryptocurrencies is what they're called, coming out, and I'll get to those. But I want to talk about Bitcoin first. The Fed and the new guy who's coming into the Fed, whose name I can't remember, has actually blessed Bitcoin and the blockchain method of payments. So no matter what we do, it's coming. It's coming our way, and we kind of can't stop it. Ben Bernanke wrote on his blog about it, all right? And Ben Bernanke's blog is where you go when you want to see what the Fed is thinking. And the Fed is thinking, all right, there's long-term promise in this. And as of December, you're going to be able to buy commodity futures on Bitcoin through the CBOT. So that's sort of another stamp of approval on Bitcoin. That happened this week. Bitcoin in and of itself, its market cap, if you took all the Bitcoin there is and added it up, is about $100 billion, which sounds like a lot. But you know, Apple is almost $1 trillion company. So Bitcoin has got a lot of room to grow, especially because it's powering more and more transactions, even though only so many transactions can be done per time on Bitcoin. It's a cryptocurrency, and lots of other cryptocurrencies have come out and have challenged its dominance, but Bitcoin is kind of the one I think that's going to stick around because people know it more. Its biggest competitor is something called Ether. How many of y'all have heard of Ether? And Ethereum. All right, there's another currency called Ether, and when people ask me if they should buy Bitcoin, I usually tell them, yeah, buy Bitcoin and a little bit of Ether, you know, just to sort of hedge your bets. And Ethereum is the name of the blockchain that Ether runs on, all right? So keep that in mind as I go through this, but once again, these things are growing like weeds. They're growing like kudzu, and nobody is able to predict how fast they're going to grow. This is the growth of Ethereum, which just came out really a couple of years ago, and on January 1st, if you had bought $100 worth of Ethereum, you'd have $700 right now. I mean, these things really, which makes I mean, I know the market's up 20% or so this year, but this just makes market gains pale. And you know, by example, this chart's a little bit outdated, but let's say the market's up 20%. If you take all digital assets, actually I calculated this the other day, it's about 600% that they're up this year, just a basket of those assets. That's what is attracting people to it. Microsoft will let you pay your Office 365 bill in Bitcoin now. Y'all may have heard that Amazon is allegedly about to allow you to pay for all your Amazon goods in Bitcoin. So it's becoming more and more accepted, but it still belies the fact that the blockchain is the important part. Visa is trying to figure out a way to use Bitcoin, but they are drifting a little bit more towards blockchain. If you want to buy a ticket through Expedia, you can buy it through Bitcoin. So there's more and more interest in it, but push that to the side because what we really want to learn about, the interesting thing, is the blockchain and what applies to you is the blockchain. The essence of the blockchain lies in its ability to support trustworthy transactions, valid transactions via networked computation in place of human monitor and control. So it's a trusted ledger that you don't have to watch all the time because everybody agrees. Like if you're doing a spreadsheet with somebody on Google Docs, everyone agrees that cell A3 is a valid cell. And let me go ahead and try and, does this thing have a laser? Oh man, that's the weakest laser ever. Anyway, look at Alice's wallet on the left. What you see is that at address A1, and just think of that as a spreadsheet, she has 10 Bitcoin. And at address A2, think of that as a cell in a spreadsheet. She's got 56 Bitcoin. And she does a transaction where she sends a total of 65 over to Bob's wallet, whose address is at B1. That's his cell address, C-E-L-L address, is at B1. And then he sends her back 5 Bitcoin and change, which is then put at a new address, which then adds a new link at the end of the blockchain. That's how it works. Every transaction adds a new link to the blockchain. Here's the meat of my speech right now. This is how blockchain works. Someone requests a transaction. It could be, I want to buy a car, and I want to buy it with Bitcoin. Someone requests a transaction. The transaction is broadcast to a bunch of computer nerds who have the entire blockchain on their computer, and essentially they bid to mine, M-I-N-E, and decrypt that transaction, which is encrypted, So they're decrypting it. So their fixed cost in all this really is electricity. So they're decrypting it and then getting paid a sliver of Bitcoin for doing that. But if you're doing dozens and dozens of transactions a day, pretty soon that can wind up being real money. So it's broadcast to a bunch of nodes. Oh, worst slide ever. You'd never know I wrote a book on PowerPoint, would you? Because that is a terrible slide. I really did. Anyway, a network of these nodes validates the fact that, okay, this transaction is a valid transaction done by known players. The transaction is completed, and then that new block, like I just told you, is added to the existing blockchain forever. The blockchain is a giant, giant, giant spreadsheet that when a cell is added on the end, it's updated all across the world to everybody that keeps a copy of that giant, giant, giant spreadsheet. So the blockchain is just a huge, huge spreadsheet that keeps getting added onto, and pretty much it gets updated on people's computers about every 15 minutes. I've got a copy at my house, and it's really just a flat text file with a bunch of encrypted addresses, and that's the other thing. You have if you do a transaction on there, if you have Bitcoin, it lives in a cell, and that cell, it's not called C3, like I was saying. It has a very long, essentially 64 character long public address. But you're the only person that can ever get to it because you have to give your private address to unlock the goods that are in there. It's like a really long PIN number. So all you really need to do is keep that secret, and in fact, you can remove your Bitcoin from the blockchain and actually store them on a barcode completely off the blockchain if you don't trust the blockchain. But I believe there are going to be many, many different blockchains. There's not just one. There's going to be public and private ones. Anyway, features of the blockchain are consensus. All the ledgers in the network are kept in sync. Everybody's spreadsheet is updated, and everybody agrees to the what's and whens of a transaction that takes place. There are records of where each asset has been in the past. All right, if somebody got a car, that asset will have its own code, and you can sort of follow it as it goes from owner to owner to owner across the blockchain, and it's immutable. It won't change. Everybody agrees that the ledger can't be undone. All right. So what it does is it forces a measure of trust on there and finality. Once it's done, it's done. Once a new block is added to the end of the blockchain, you're done. That's it. Everything's done. So you can see, if you understand Google Docs, you kind of understand blockchain. Did that make sense? So just think of it as a giant Google Docs. All right. So then I just told you all this, so I'm going to blast through this slide. If you just want to live look at transactions going on in the blockchain, you can go to blockchain.info right now and watch transactions as they're occurring on the blockchain. And it's kind of interesting to do, especially like when people do ransomware to hospitals. You can actually see the cell. You know the cell they're paying it to. And you can see like $2,000 of ransom land in a certain cell. You can watch it happen, and then it kind of gets transferred around, but you never really know who the owner was. All right, you never know who the owner of the cell was because they're the only person that possesses the private key. All right, it's very kind of interesting. And there are the transaction hashes that I told you about, and that's what you decrypt when you mine Bitcoin. All right, I've reviewed that a little bit, but the point of these slides is basically the fact that news regarding the blockchain is coming fast and furious, and we're getting a lot of institutional and governmental interest in it right now. Transaction fees are kind of interesting. If you're buying a car, let's say if you bought a car or $10,000 of something with Visa, what does Visa charge, like 3%? So you would pay $300. Right now, an average crypto trade on Bitcoin would be $2.40. That's why Visa, and that goes to the miner, M-I-N-E-R. So that's why Visa is watching this so carefully, is because it has the potential, and it's not reality yet, but it has the potential to really drive down transaction fees. If you look at Google searches, cryptocurrency is in red, blockchain is in blue, and look how much further it's growing, or quicker it's growing, than Bitcoin and Ethereum. Just the concept of blockchain is starting to sort of grow logarithmically because people realize now what you can do. All right, this is sort of the ecosystem we have. We have cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Litecoin. You see them on the left. We have decentralized application platforms like Ethereum, which I talked to you about, but there are many other ones. There's Dragon Chain, which I'm going to talk to y'all after a little while. And there's some that are really focused on privacy. They're cryptocurrencies if you really want to keep money from out of everybody's eyes. So this is more news. When I did this slide in Q2, Bitcoin broke 3,000. Like I said, it's 7,000 right now. But really where we're heading to is people having their own, in their own business. It's like having your own database, which you share with your customers, but what you have is your own blockchain, your own private blockchain that you're sharing. A lot of people are using the Ethereum model. And in fact, an alliance was formed recently of these giant companies, Intel, JP Morgan, and they're trying to standardize blockchain on the Ethereum model, not the Ether, which is the currency, but on the Ethereum model. All kinds of businesses are doing it, including healthcare a lot, which I'll explain why. But in China, there was a giant conference on it recently. And when I say giant conference, I mean it was huge. And when the Chinese are recognizing that something is going to change the world, they pay very close attention to it, and they are paying very close attention to it right now. This was a study that was done, what sector of blockchain applications are you most bullish on? And really it's the third one from the left that I think will apply to y'all a lot, asset management tools. Assets within y'all's facilities, all right? I think that's gonna be a huge, huge thing for y'all. And as I mentioned, there's public blockchains like Ethereum, enterprise blockchains, which let's say Disney, because I'm gonna get to them in a minute, might have, and then hybrid models, which are built on public and private blockchains. And public blockchains can be analogous to the networks of Google and Amazon, living on the internet, whereas enterprise blockchains are analogous to a giant Oracle database at your company or a giant IBM database at your company. It's going to completely disrupt, I've got a slide in a few minutes, it's going to completely disrupt the supply chain because it allows all parties in the supply chain to access the blockchain at the same time and stay updated on goods as they travel across the blockchain. Real estate, it's already changing because people are inventing models to have titles be transferred. You can literally buy and sell a house with Bitcoin on the blockchain now, and there's a model for title transfer which is going to live on a private blockchain that's coming along now too. So rather than kind of having our antiquated method of title transfer, it's looking like it's possible, the potential is there that it might exist on the blockchain. And like I said, there's going to be two types of blockchain, the big public one and then the private one that y'all are going to use within y'all's own companies. And I started noticing last year in healthcare that this was picking up speed because there's a conference called HIMSS, which is the IT nerds in healthcare, and they started devoting lots and lots of sessions to blockchain, I noticed. And in fact, they had one huge side event to it, Blockchain in Healthcare, Rock Stars of Technology event, because and the government got involved, the National Coordinator for Healthcare Information Technology, because what they're trying to do, the big problem with EHRs now, electronic healthcare records, is that electronic healthcare records aren't standardized, all right? They try and they're not interoperable. They try and have one system talk to another, but they really can't. But you know where they really can? They really can on a blockchain, all right? And that's what's going to make in healthcare very interesting. So what's going to happen is in hospitals and smaller healthcare institutions, what you're going to have is electronic healthcare records living on the blockchain, but also interacting with sensor-based information within the facilities to give a giant picture. We heard a little bit about this yesterday, to give a giant picture of a patient's overall welfare. And like I said, the government is completely in on this. They were sponsoring a bunch of white papers on it because they realized that this actually is the future to electronic healthcare records. It's going to be on some type of blockchain. The envisioned benefits, Cognizant did a study on it, and improved patient care through personalization and real-time data monitoring, which we heard a little bit about yesterday, and I'm going to talk about some more in a few minutes, is going to be huge, but it's all going to be accessible on individual blockchains. Google's all in on it in terms of healthcare. They are all in on the blockchain. There's been codathons with blockchain, papers written about blockchain, case studies all over the place written about it, and it's because electronic healthcare records is such a big deal to all healthcare institutions, and it can actually make, if you look at the top, that's a hospital's provider node, and you can see the EHR on the left takes a record in. There's a bunch of databases there, but on the far right, you can see everything stored on the blockchain, and then at the bottom, that can either be a pharmacist or the patient or someone else, but everybody in that whole big picture agrees on the information that has been placed on the blockchain on behalf of a patient. All right, so it's something that's trusted and standardized, and everybody can be, everybody, I'll take a question at the end. Everybody can trust. You don't have to be calling everybody back and forth, but it gets more complicated. Patient data, it being interoperable right now, is handled by something called HL7, which is just a big XML file. And it's a little bit nasty, and I believe that blockchain this is an article from Wired. Tom Price, who I guess is not with us anymore at the HHS, was a real proponent of it, and I hope whoever follows up on streaming the EHR process through the use of the blockchain. This is an IBM paper, Healthcare Rallies for Blockchain. Respondents to a survey, I've got a more updated one at the end that I'm going to show you, are pretty much positive about using blockchain. People who are identified as trailblazers in healthcare, 16% of them are going to use it this year. We're looking for mass adoption in healthcare institutions of blockchain between 2018 and 2020, and then the laggards will be 2020 and after. This is a technology that's coming on really, really super fast, faster than anybody thought. And in medicine, this is what people are looking at using it for: clinical trial records, regulatory compliance, the EHRs, device data, sensor data, treatment, billing and claims, asset management, and contract management, because there's something called smart contracts, which you can do on blockchains, which I'll get into. But it's a contract where you immediately know if the other party, let's say you're in a supply chain, you immediately know if somebody has violated the terms of that contract because it's living live there on the blockchain. There is an audit trail where you can tell if somebody is sort of cutting up, and not fulfilling their part of the contract, because there's a trusted audit trail. So smart contracts you can go in and look, but data, individual personalized data, is not revealed, but terms of the contract and assets that you're looking at are being revealed. HealthBank is a company that's basically putting all sorts of data on blockchain, healthcare-related data, which I'm going to talk about in about 2 minutes. But blockchain, what it does is it enables trust amongst people, and it parallels the growth of the internet to connect people globally, especially people in business. The essence of the blockchain lies in its ability to support trustworthy transactions. Trust is the essence of the blockchain. That's pretty much all you got to remember: Google Docs and trust. And you have a functional understanding of what the blockchain is in place of human monitor and control. And I've talked about this a bit before, and one or two of y'all may have seen me do it, but where this weaves its way into facilities design is through the concept of ambient intelligence, which is where all the information from all these sensors that are living in healthcare facilities now, which are churning out data, basically it all gets contextualized and made sense of. And one big example of this that you can look at is Disney and Disney's magic bands. How many of y'all have used magic bands at Disney before? All right, was it an okay experience? Yeah, it's got an RFID chip in there, and you can essentially, basically it knows where you are in the park, but you want to open your door to your room, it's on the bracelet. You want to pay for something, it's on your bracelet. If you go into a restaurant, before you even go into the restaurant, you can stand by one of these kiosks. It knows who you are. It can order. You can sit down in the restaurant, and it automatically finds you and serves you your meal. that you ordered outside because it knows where you are. It's using all these sensors and data to track you, and I believe that the Magic Band is where a patient wristband in a hospital is going to wind up being. And Disney is all in on this type of project, and where this interests me is because there's an analogy to be drawn between the hospitality industry and the hospital industry. There's a lot of similarities between the two, and I think you're going to find a lot of technologies that Disney is using, and I'm about to show you how many technologies there are. A lot of technologies that Disney is using are going to make its way into healthcare facilities. Disney spent about 3 or 4 years inventing their own private blockchain called Dragon Chain, all right? And in fact, Dragon Chain had a bit of a public offering this week on November 2nd. It's kind of a big deal, and Disney got in early on the blockchain because they recognized they could do a lot of things with it. If you want to look at it now, it's sort of split off from Disney, and it's dragonchain.com. But what Disney, and these are some example fields in it, you know, records that are carried into the blockchain record, you know, just normal database type records. But what's interesting is the uses that Disney has foreseen for this and is already using in the Dragon Chain. If you look at it, identity systems, ticketing, rights expressions, and licensing. In other words, Disney is putting their IP on the blockchain. Disney is nothing but IP, and so that's sort of a big deal for them. Decentralized processing, voting systems, legal, audit. Oh, there's a whole nother page of this. Entitlements tracking, more IP, customer-facing currencies. There's such thing as Disney dollars, by the way. And on the enterprise, they're sharing data with different parts of the corporation on their own blockchain, and in different hotels, sensory data, legal data, you know, basically every department, they're shifting functions in that department over onto a blockchain. So all this information is coming in, and the way you make sense of it is through what I was just talking about, which is ambient intelligence. How many of y'all have heard about ambient intelligence? It's like artificial intelligence, but the ambient refers to all the sensors that are living around us now. So you collect these sensors, like the Magic Bands, and you take all this data and figure things out. It's sort of like the computer HAL in 2001: A Space Odyssey, which collected all the data on the spaceship and kept the guys on the spaceship alive. Ambient intelligence takes information and gives it context. It's intelligent computing where the environments, facilities, support the people inhabiting them. It's an interesting paradigm, and especially in healthcare, because healthcare is now generating more data than basically any other industry than I can think of, because everybody, and it started with the EHRs, everybody's data is going on there. So ambient intelligence gathers data from the nurses, the ER teams, somebody living at their house, robots. People are going to have personal robots that sort of live with them, little Furbies. I've talked about it before. On-body sensors. I've seen a lot of Fitbits here, Apple Watches. All this stuff is gathered, contextualized, and made sense of to where you can infer things from it. Here's ambient sensors used in smart environments, smart tiles, cameras, microphones that measure different types of motion and sound and things like that. But there's also body sensors in patients in healthcare facilities that are generating data. So all this data is taken, and ambient intelligence takes the ubiquity of these devices, and these devices are getting more and more ubiquitous every day, and they contextualize the data. And what they do essentially is they recognize an activity, they discover a behavioral pattern. Let's say you like going to Space Mountain a lot, all right? Well, then it might generate something where you get a free fast pass to go into Space Mountain. Or it might detect an anomaly, you never go to Space Mountain, and it gives you a decision. That is basically the upshot of ambient intelligence, but it's context aware, it's personalized, it adapts to your behavior, it's transparent, and it's going to be transparent when it lives on the blockchain, and it's going to be everywhere. That's the thing. All this data is going to be everywhere all the time, and what I'm thinking is going to happen, in the same way the internet came up with all kinds of things that we never thought the internet would be used for, I think the blockchain is going to be, in terms of handling data, is going to be coming up with all kinds of missions that we never would have thought of, especially in y'all's industry, which is why I'm wanting y'all to take these concepts and sort of think ahead. And it all does it by inference. It's inferring patterns from data. For instance, this is used in elder care right now a lot. So this is a lady living in her home, and she has a sensor up there in the corner which recognizes her, all right? And it's sort of, this is her apartment, let's say in an extended care facility, and it begins to learn her behavior. It sees when she's in one room, goes to another room, what time she goes to bed, that sort of thing, and it learns her behavior, all right? The top is one apartment, the bottom is another apartment, but you see the sensors and activity within the sensors within the different rooms. And what it does is, and at some point you just give up your privacy, we're just going to. How many of y'all have Amazon Echoes in your house? You know, everybody's listening to everything you do now. I mean, at some point, privacy is pretty much just gone. But you have motion detectors, temperature detectors, light detectors, and these all combine and are contextualized to figure out the behavior of a patient or somebody who is living in a facility to see what their habits are. And if at some point you realize, well, you know what, the benefit of this is far superior to the privacy I sacrifice, and the data can be anonymized to a certain extent, then yeah, I'm willing to give up that information about me. This really out of focus, horrible graph, different colors on the right represent different activities, and that graph goes from midnight to midnight the next day. So purple, if you look, you can see deep purple in the mornings. That's when people take medicine. You can see when they bathe. You can see when they're sleeping, which is all the way over to the left. So these are different behavioral patterns of a person, and what you can do is draw a picture of that person. So let's say, for instance, they go into the kitchen, but they don't come out for 2 hours, and that's an anomalous behavior. Well, somebody can be sent an alert, all right? All this information is taken together, and like, that's not normal behavior. You know, if someone goes into the bathroom and they're in there for 2 hours and they're not my 15-year-old son, then it might be an anomaly, all right? Yeah, file that under other. But basically, you can get a pattern of a person's behavior over a longer and longer period of time, right? And then if there's a discrepancy in that pattern, like if they fall and they're in the bathroom, you know, and they've fallen, you can do something about it and send help to them earlier. I got interested in this when a friend of my mom, who's 100 years old, fell down, and you know, she was too proud in the assisted living facility, too proud to wear that little button thing, and so she wouldn't wear it, and she was on the floor for 8 or 9 hours before somebody discovered her. Whereas if there was a system of sensors in that facility, which they are installing, they would know that's anomalous behavior for her to be in the bathroom that long, and it's a problem. Or you can see up there in the corner, you can essentially use the technology of the Microsoft Kinect, which used to work for the Xbox, which it doesn't make you look like a person, it makes you look like a blob, so they're not seeing you naked, but they can identify you as a blob, and if you're on the floor for a while, it can go, you know what, something's not right. I've been doing a lot of work with the Echo, this is actually some of my programming, to listen for ambient phrases which might mean trouble, like, you know, please help, or help me. If you look down towards the bottom, to generate on the Echo, to generate a response, use an assistance intent. It's called intents. And if somebody says, help me, it'll cause an action. In this case, it would call somebody's daughter. Now, the problem I'm having with that is, you know, when you have an Echo, you have to say, Alexa, shut off the lights. Half the time, I can't remember Alexa's name. And if I'm lying on the floor in trouble, I'm definitely not going to remember Alexa's name. So I'm trying to figure out a way to get around that where the TV won't set off. If somebody says, please help on TV, it won't set off this and cause an alarm. And that can happen. Did y'all see the South Park about a month ago where Cartman started yelling out, hey Alexa, put obscene, you know, pick your obscene device on my shopping list, and in millions of homes, an obscene item was added to people's shopping lists. All right, and they did it for Siri too. So if you had OK Siri enabled, you got, well, I don't even want to say it because I kind of got in a little bit of trouble the last time I say it, but you got strange things put on your shopping list, or Cartman made you do really odd things. So this is what I'm having a little bit of trouble with this device, but it's a great device for maybe hearing people who are in peril and need some help. So inside of facilities, and also the reason I'm showing the bed is you can put a monitoring device under the bed to tell how well people are sleeping, or if they're breathing, or if they're stopped breathing and somebody needs to get to them right away. And these are all pieces of data where there are anomalies being looked for. Everything in healthcare's turned into one giant data business now, and no business has as much scale as they do, and right now no business has as much IT as they do. I showed y'all University Hospital earlier. If you adjust it for inflation, and that's in Augusta, Georgia, where I'm from, that hospital cost in today's dollars $70 million to build. The electronic healthcare record system they put in there cost $75 million. All right? So the EHR cost more than the building did. All right? That's crazy, but it shows the importance of IT to the entire healthcare operation right now. This fellow named Hans Lombardo wrote a great paper on using blockchain for Internet of Things. What we're doing here, what I'm really talking about, is tying in the Internet of Things in y'all's healthcare facilities and using the blockchain to store the data and make it accessible. I'm going to have to speed up just a tiny bit here. But for instance, I wanted to throw another for instance. There are a lot of things in hospitals, devices that you don't think about that are security problems. What the blockchain can do is help with security problems. It's really super easy. You know, these are printers now, and it's really kind of super easy to look up a printer on Shodan. Have y'all ever gone on Shodan, where you can look up Internet of Things? You can look up like CT scanners at certain hospitals and get their IP address. Yeah, you can absolutely do that. But one use for blockchain is to sort of lock this data down when these crazy hackers like these guys think about flying drones outside your healthcare facility to crack your network. I went to the Black Hat Conference. People are actually doing this. They call it Crizono, and they float it outside. They don't even get in the building. They float outside your building, pick up the Wi-Fi signal, and crack it. In security in systems, there's some people doing work on putting HVAC information on the blockchain now to try and make it more secure so that only the people that need to see it can, because you heard that sort of apocryphal story of the hotel in, I believe it was Denmark, where somebody hacked the HVAC and the lock system and locked everybody in their rooms. All right, just mischievous stuff that can go on in facilities. If these kids who attend Black Hat can do it, they will, and then they'll try and charge you for it. Medical devices inside healthcare facilities. This is other type of data that if it lived on the blockchain, it would be a little less accessible. Firmware update was just shot out to a certain pacemaker because pacemakers can be hacked. If you get the IP address of a pacemaker, you can stop a pacer and kill a person dead. And hospitals are full of these type of devices. So what we're trying to get to in healthcare facilities, I believe, is all the Internet of Things. This is Shodan, where I actually looked up in a hospital just at random to see if I could find a CT device, and I guess it wound up at Franklin County Hospital somewhere. What we're trying to do is take all this information, which puts the patients at danger, and the electronic healthcare records, and put it someplace where that information is not accessible to them, because hospitals are just full of data. And the oncology department generates a ton of data. The imaging systems generate a bunch of data. X-ray systems generate a bunch of data. And what we're trying to do is get this data to a safe place, but a place where it can be studied and aggregated and inferences can be made from it to protect the health of the patient. By the way, you may not know this, but that's University Hospital again. Just for fun, I went on to see if I could identify devices through the pictures on their website, and here they are in the hospital, and if I could identify a couple of the IP numbers from them, and I could. So basically don't put things, just never put anything on the internet. Another problem with healthcare facilities is there's radiation going on in there now. And there's a security problem because some of these hackers were showing off how they could hack radiation monitors. I'm just kind of throwing that one out there because it's a weird idea. But basically, if we can use blockchain, and now what we're going from is the Internet of Things to the chain of things. When you see COT, it's the chain of things. And what the chain of things says is that the utilization of blockchain technology to secure Internet of Things devices and sensors, that's the goal, and it can be accomplished by authenticating devices and data points of origin, securely sending data from devices to the blockchain, maintaining data security on the blockchain, which thus far can't be hacked, and sharing data securely with individuals who have private and public keys, people who are trusted. Remember I talked about trust. People who are trusted with their private and public keys. Really quickly, I wanted to show you a facility. It's not a medical facility, but IBM is on this blockchain thing like white on rice. I mean, they are, in fact, people are calling them like international blockchain machines now because they're focusing so much on blockchain. And they went to a building that runs a lot of facilities, ISS, and they mixed, we heard a little bit about Watson yesterday, and what they're doing is they're taking all the sensors in the building and they're getting Watson to analyze them and perform this ambient intelligence, which I told you about, because ambient intelligence is artificial intelligence, which is what Watson is, plus sensors, plus data like electronic healthcare records. And yeah, so they have, you can see where all the sensors are in the building. They're making the building come alive. They know what sensors are in what rooms. There's a total of 527 devices in this place. And they've got buildings all over the world. That's what that's showing. In one room, or on one screen that Watson's looking at, it knows that there's 78 people in the building and they need 158 plates for them. That's how specific this building is. And this is a conference room, and it can tell when the conference room is empty and not being used, or with this underneath the table, can tell how many people are actually attending the conference. So if you're bringing lunch, you know that there's 5 people in that room that you need to bring lunch to because it knows how many plates are there. So what you see it's doing, plus you can actually text the AI and say, bring me a Sharpie or something like that. But what it does is it makes the entire building smart because it's aggregating all the data in there. It's putting it on the blockchain, and it's letting Watson, or pick your AI of choice, letting Watson make sense of that data and predict what you might need. Now, I mentioned supply chain earlier, and this is a slide of IBM's blockchain. And you can see right now, if you're shipping something, there's airport records, bank records, port records, ocean carrier records, authority records, airlines records. Well, if they're on a private blockchain, everybody has all that information at once, has trusted access to it, and you just skip a ton of middleman steps that are holding things up right now. And supply chain management, it's brilliant. Walmart's actually using it to check food safety from foreign countries all along the supply chain. So people are using it now, and it sounds kind of science fiction-y, but the interesting thing about it, Microsoft's in on it big too, the interesting thing about it is it's going to be huge in facilities in ways we can't imagine right now. But what I'm trying to do is ground y'all in a way to where y'all can, you know, imagine it for me. Black Book Market Research, I'll close with this, did a study recently, and this was of hospital execs, and 19% of responding hospital executives and 76% of payers were either considering deployed or were in the process of implementing blockchain solution sets, and 19% of 4,500 hospitals. I went to Georgia Tech, I can't do that math. What's that, 800? All right, that's about 800 facilities. That's a big start. 29% of hospital leaders have a working understanding of blockchain right now. So if you're not learning it, what I'm hoping I'm doing here is at least making you somewhat conversant in the language in it, so that when you're talking to people, you know, you feel grounded in this, and also so that you can think ahead, like we all wish we had thought ahead 25 years ago of the uses that the internet was going to have, so that we don't get the future wrong. But I think one big clue as to why blockchain might be the future is when a corporation like Disney goes as all in as they did in this technology, and the way that applies to y'all is Disney is just an incredibly huge facilities company. I thank you for your time this morning. I hope you learned. Did y'all learn something? Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Ron Galloway.